a lot about the creeping centralization and the complexity of the dynamic between centers and states that sometimes come in the way. Yet we were just speaking before, and you were talking about how much Telangana has done to improve ease of business within these confines. If you could just talk a little bit about those innovations that you have implemented, and how have you as a state been able to work through these tensions of having to run to New Delhi for lots of for the glorious nod?
Firstly, we continue to run to New Delhi without question. I think that's not gone away. But nevertheless, I think we have done some things which are very much within our confines, within our limitations, which I think have yielded good results. In the last 5 years, see, we are the youngest state in India. Telangana is the newest and youngest state in India. We were the 29th state, and I think we became 28th recently after the abrogation of Article 370. So in the last 5 years, in fact, Telangana has done some truly revolutionary and benchmarking things. One of the things we've done, we've come out with a unique policy to approve and to process any industrial clearances that have to be given by the state. We've come out with a policy called as the TSI Pass. What it stands for essentially is Telangana State Industrial Approval, Project Approval and Self-Certification Committee. Now, this enactment of the legislature, which happened about 5 years ago, has delivered wonderful results for us. I'll just give you 3 salient features of this policy. First thing is, if you have a piece of land in the state of Telangana, which has been allotted by the government, or you may have procured it yourself, you do not have to apply to seek a clearance from the government at all. You don't have any interface with the government. You can start construction on day one without talking to anybody, as long as you believe that you're in compliance with the law of the land. The second thing, well, you know, some people might say, we've heard this before. Second thing, we've come out with a single window clearance system. You can say, yes, but the joke is there are always multiple windows behind that one single window, right? What we've done away with is, by way of this new legislation, we have come out with a policy where if we don't give you clearances in 15 days, on the 16th day, it's a deemed approval. It's an approval by default. And on the 16th day, there's another thing that also kicks in. Any bureaucrat, even if he is an Indian Administrative Service officer, who's held responsible for the delay in holding up a clearance, will be levied a fine of 1,000 rupees per day. No other Indian state that I know of, at least, will tell you this. This has worked like magic. For those of you who are, naysayers and disbelievers in governments getting things done, in the last 5 years, we gave out nearly 11,000 clearances, out of which 8,400 have already commenced operations, and the remaining are in different stages. We've been able to create nearly 12 lakh, 1.2 million jobs directly, and at least twofold that indirectly in the last 5 years. And we have stood on the EODB rankings, on the ease of doing business rankings, which are given jointly by World Bank and Government of India. We stood number 1 for 2 consecutive years, along with Andhra Pradesh. So that's the sort of policy making and changes that we were able to bring about within the state's framework. Yes, we still run to Delhi, like Mr. Nath pointed out. We still run to Delhi for a lot of things. But in fact, we've taken it as a novel opportunity. We said, how can we champion the cause of industry? For instance, there was a large electronics manufacturing company which wanted to come in and set up a manufacturing unit in Telangana. But they had issues with the Government of India in terms of trade barriers, in terms of some restrictions, as Mr. Nath pointed out, export-import policies, etc., the exempt policy. So we said, we will be your advocate. We will plead your case with Government of India. We will be your partner. In fact, when a state throws its weight behind an investor or an industry sector, I think it lends credence to their argument. When they go, they can as well go and meet the minister here, but they would be a vested interested party. But when we throw our weight behind, that is when the true federal structure can come into play, and that is when we actually can effect some serious change. We are definitely happy with what we've done, but yes, a lot more can be done. Make in India campaign, for instance, has not taken off as well as it should have. There are some states, which have done well. There are some others which haven't. One last thought on this structure of federalism. As long as we understand each other's boundaries and roles and responsibilities, Delhi needs to understand what it should step into and what it should not. There is the state list, there is the center list, and there is the concurrent list. Mm-hmm. I think they have to take a lot of things off the concurrent list and the center list and hive them off and give them to the states so that they can perform better. Because stronger states will only lead to stronger country. And the last thing I would say on this Prime Minister keeps talking about Team India, cooperative federalism. We have heard a lot, but I think now is the time to actually start delivering on the promise and making things happen on the ground in reality.
But Mr. Reddy, even as we talk about rural to urban and transitions, when we think about urbanization, one of the big question marks that comes to everybody's mind, I'm sorry to put you on the spot there, but it's too tempting not to ask you, is about Amravati. And how is the government of Andhra Pradesh seeing the urban transition, both in terms of what it takes to build a new city, a new capital center, but also how does one draw on that capital center to ensure that gains are had in smaller towns and census towns where the actual urban transition is taking place?
First of all, thank you all, and good afternoon to everyone. It's indeed a pleasure to be here on today's panel, and I must say that sitting amongst such an experienced panel, I'm actually more of a student here than a teacher, so I must say I'm more here to learn. But however, to your question, I think it's to the urbanization, what you would say. There's been some fundamental legacy flaws. I would not get much into it, but then I would just put it out this way to you. In the post-division of Andhra Pradesh, if you really look at our urbanization of the residual Andhra Pradesh state, with what we have got, actually at that point of a time, it was Vizag as the only urban city. If you call it as a true urban structure. Of course, the previous government had this grandiose plan of developing a world-class city, Amravati, and they proposed Amravati as a state capital. And we're still today with it. It'll stand as an administrative capital. Now, to construct such an a capital of that world structure, world famous structures, it requires a huge amount of capital. It requires huge amounts of capital outlay in it. Now, in today's environment where your trade headwinds, your industrial, international, financial markets are taking a beating down, raising funds and raising such kind of things just on a pure notion of building a real estate does not sell well in the international markets. So what we have done is gone back and with a very young government, we've just been in the power for the last 3 months. So we are looking at how do we do this? One, at the same time we want to make sure that it remains as our capital, but also at the same time we also have got Vizag as a city which has got a great urban setting. It's got a very cosmopolitan population. It's a low-hanging fruit, and it requires a lesser amount of capital for realizing a greater value over there. So we are focusing on saying that, what are the advantages that we've got, in the present state of Andhra Pradesh, and we'd like to focus on that. So, and as I said, we're capital deficient state. So making sure that whatever resources that we have got, and making sure that we employ those resources to creating greater values, first thing what we do. So that's a revenue generator for us. Now, once we have these revenue generators kicking in, then you can start planning on your subsequent downstream, whatever grandiose plans that you've got. But also, let me also tell you at this point of a time, we would also like to align with this government of India's plan of $5 trillion economy. If you really look today, the state of Andhra Pradesh is contributing roughly about $120 billion. We stand in the total, I think, 9th position. And the top 5 states take up about 43% of contribution of GDP to the. So we are saying, how do we improve ourselves? How do we improve ourselves in contributing for the future of this $5 trillion economy? At $120 billion, today we're capturing, let's say, about 6%, 5% or something like that. Now, if I have to grow to 5 trillion, support the 5 trillion structure, we need to grow probably 2.5 times. And if I'm not wrong, there are only about 8 or 9 states which can really support that $5 trillion economy. And we are actually doing a roadmap of saying, well, how do we do this? So we've actually come down to this saying that the 3 fundamental parameters that we need to look at. One is the social infrastructure, social policies, your economic policies, and the most important is also your environment policies. Sorry. These 3 sail in tandem. They need to be aligned together. Unless we have all of them, 3 of them aligned, won't we see such kind of a growth, a spur in growth. So we in Andhra Pradesh, the government, we've said very categorically that we will come out with an outlay of saying that, the social empowerment will be the devolution of powers. In fact, a lot of panel members have just been discussing about the federalism. If you really look at federalism today, what we see is that there is greater authority with lesser accountability. So we would see that, if you really go back and look into your constitution, it's very clearly described there. Devolution of powers to the states is very defined over there, right down to the village panchayats. So we do not have to really relook and reinvent federalism at all. It's actually there in our constitution. So now if you really look at it, what we are doing over here is, we are looking at devolution of powers. We are actually decentralizing our administrative. That's the reason why yesterday, our Chief Minister inaugurated the first village secretariat system. When this was a system that was actually on our father of the nation's mind, actually powers to the village panchayats. So this is what we've done. We've taken administrations right down to village panchayat systems. And at the same time, we are backing it up with a social empowerment programs, or this Navaratnas, or what we are calling it, that's social empowerment programs. And we are matching it with creating world-class economic, the new economic policies that are going to be coming out is going to support this structure. And to support this economic structure, we said we need to create world-class skills at workforce. So what we are focusing is, as a government, we are only a policy derivators. We will not get into saying that, what should be set up, what cannot be set up. We want to see that we create the atmosphere for businesses to come and thrive. So for them to thrive, between a good policy, good infrastructure, and a good employment and transparency, I think I've done my duty.
No, the reason I wanted to bring Telangana in is because traditionally, both Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, when it was merged as Andhra Pradesh, have been slow decentralizers. And now, as a new state, you're beginning to set up institutions and systems. So just to get your thoughts on how you see the role of local governments in this process.
Let me put it this way. Like Mr. Nath said, there is a serious dearth of planners. There's a serious dearth of, town planners, so specifically to speak. But let me also put it this way. I'm also the urban development minister of my state. See, there is no dearth of ideas. In fact, there is luxury of ideas, but there is a serious poverty of capital. That is what we are going through. In fact, the whole discussion hinges on one fundamental premise, that devolution to the states is a good idea, and states again devolving to Zilla Parishads, and again also devolving to the blocks and also to the Gram Panchayats is a terrific idea. Yes, that is what I think Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi did when he was proposing the 73rd and 74th Amendment to the Constitution, etc., etc. Yes, you've also, I think, put an accusation on us, me and my, colleague minister here from Andhra Pradesh, that we've been slow devolvers. No, in fact, no, not slow decentralizers, you called us. In fact, as the youngest state in India, I'm proud to say this with you, proud to share this with you. In the last 5 years, when we started off our journey as a state with 10 districts, now we have 33 districts in place. Now we also have 3,400 more village panchayats. In fact, we have recognized all of our tribal habitations and hamlets as village panchayats as well. We've also created new blocks. We've also created new revenue divisions. And we've made sure that each of these units receives great deal of devolution through planned budget. So therefore, you cannot make the same accusation anymore. But I can tell you two more things about what is happening in the landscape of India. Mr. Nath said, people move. Yes, people urbanize, people suburbanize. Why do they do it? For three things. Firstly, in search of better livelihood. Secondly, in search of better healthcare opportunities. Thirdly, in search of better education opportunities. Yes, our cities, our urban metropolises have become hubs of economic activity. That's why people move there. Can we solve this problem like Honorable Meghalaya CM said, why can't we create smart villages, etc.? You may be able to solve two pieces of the puzzle. You may be able to provide better healthcare. You also may be able to provide better education opportunities. But will you be able to provide better livelihoods? I seriously doubt that. Why do people migrate? That's the fundamental question that needs to be addressed. Let me see, we are celebrating the 150th birth anniversary of the father of our nation, Mahatma Gandhi. It was yesterday. Bapu, it was, I think, who famously said, India lives in its villages. Yes, India, still 70% of India lives in its villages. But India is run by its urban pockets. India's urban pockets are the prime contributors to the GDP or the GSDP. For example, Hyderabad, the capital city of my state, contributes nearly 45% to 50% of the GSDP of my state. In fact, a funny example is, it's not just states and countries, even large corporates, large institutions. I was having a conversation with Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, who also incidentally happens to be a Hyderabadi. So we were having a very casual conversation. He goes, the same logic applies to us. Microsoft operates out of 180 countries, but 70% of our revenues come from 80 cities across the world. So the fact is, yes, India lives in villages, but India is run by its cities, India is run by its towns. And the crumbling of urban infrastructure is happening purely because of one reason. There is no dearth of ideas. Yes, there is a dearth of planners. We can outsource, we can bring in external agencies to plan, support, vision, etc. But there is a serious dearth of capital. For instance, what am I saying? I've gone to an agency outside of India, I don't want to name names. They were ready to support a large infra project in my state, in Hyderabad. But unfortunately, it had to be routed through the DEA, the Department of Economic Affairs. DEA said this is not allowed. Just slammed the door on us. You know, they cited FRBM, they cited a bunch of other restrictions. Point I'm trying to make is, Government of India has to be the enabler. You cannot be the stumbling block in the ways of states receiving capital from agencies across the world. And unless we don't solve that puzzle, our urban infra will crumble, our GDP will continue to come down. Now we are at, I think, 5%. I don't know what it will be next quarter. So we just have to watch out.
So is it that we're saying we need a new fora for center-state conversations and center-state discussions to take place?
I think you should have invited a central minister to this panel as well, and then we could have...
In fact, Mr. Reddy, a lot of the urban transition is taking place in rural areas as people are moving from farm to non-farm. So do we need to rethink the local governance structure too? As you said, a lot of urban areas are rural panchayats. That itself poses a lot of problems when it comes to basic service delivery like sewage and sanitation and other civic services.
Actually, to take off on what they were just said, that is that one of the great reasons that we found out was what is the reasons why people migrate from rural to urban areas. In the underlying word is opportunities, but at the same time, there is also a great need of facilities upgradation at the village levels. Now we've seen the sanitation, and when I talk about sanitation and healthcare. There are a lot of times, we're giving at most of the time, it's more of a reactive kind of a thing. When we brought in the healthcare systems like, Arogyashri or public welfare system, it is basically reacting to some ailment that has happened already. But now we're going, much more downstream, upstream and saying that, let's stop where exactly it's happening. So we are focusing a lot on sanitation there. Now, if you see in rural India, most of the time, the sanitation is one of the most underprivileged area that we see over there. Okay, Government of India has come out with a program, that Swachh Bharat program. I mean, okay, they've had some certain decent amount of success over there. But it's just not the Swachh Bharat alone that is required. We require a huge amount of, as I said, clean water is required. Apart from clean water, we do require a lot of facilities that are available in urban structures. Like, for example, water pipelines, sewage treatments. These are things that are all required, and this requires a collective kind of a planning. So if any government policy makers can start addressing these at those micro levels, and which is what we are doing right now. So what we've said is that when we are creating that village secretariat system, we are also creating village infrastructure at the down level, so that we stop this immigration taking place. So we're saying that we provide the same facilities, because as you know, our urban structures are stressed. They're bursting at the seams. We cannot have, as I said, capital is a dearth today. And investing furthermore, I only see that the problem is going to keep growing much worse than what we see today. So one of the bigger things is that if I can stop it right at the stage of where migration is taking place, go to the village level, block level, and create that infrastructure, create the facilities, provide it. It'll be a fraction of the cost what I'll be doing it in urban structure. One, if I do a same pipeline in urban structure, the land acquisition cost alone will outbeat the project cost itself. Now, if I were to do that in the village, it's much easier. So when you look at the dynamics of economics also, it supports me to go back to the village level. So that's what we're planning to do.
For more updates, please subscribe 99 TV Telugu.